Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina-r-Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here. And today, I have a guest who's going to be talking with us about loving your body and loving your life, helping women become empowered, helping you become empowered, helping you become your best self, and thinking about the mental aspect of womanhood. You know, why we do what we do, why we give up when we give up, and working through some of the ways that we can become more empowered so that we contribute to life in a way that feels good for us. So today I'm going to be talking with jenna-lisa-lobos. She's an author and a podcaster, both named Love Your Body, Love Your Life. So without further ado, Jenna, thank you so much for saying yes to me today.
Thank you, Gina. Such an honor to be on your show.
It's exciting to have you because this particular topic, as we chatted before we hit record, we find in our own lives how often we either hide or we hold back or we give up. Whatever it is that we do, oftentimes as women, we sabotage ourselves or we self-criticize. We find ourselves in a negative place in our head and in our decisions. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I think it's so important here on Feminine Roadmap that we have the conversations that will shift us toward, like your mission, our best self. So why don't you share a little bit with my audience about who you are and what your mission is?
Well, my mission is exactly what you just said, is to empower women to be their best self, to know that they have choices to shift at any time in their life for whatever is not working in their life, Gina, to know that they have choices, to know that they can become empowered in their money situation, in their relationship situation, with their body, with how they view themselves, with getting their art into the world, to be seen and heard and to not play small. I think that's another thing. I know you touched on a couple of things that we as women tend to do, and playing small is, for me, I see that a lot, and I've experienced it myself, so I know that happens. So yeah, so that's my mission. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
Awesome. So when you wrote your book, Love Your Body, Love Your Life, and you started a podcast, what was it that led you to actually take that big step and create that art? What was the motivation for that?
Yeah. That's a really, that's a broad question. So I'll just take you back. So at 30 years old, Gina, I found myself in a very dysfunctional relationship. And I shared with you when we were talking before we hit record that I'm highly empathic and I feel a lot in my body. And when I found myself in this dysfunctional relationship, I didn't want to believe it in my head, but my body was showing lots of signs and my digestive system was completely out of whack. I couldn't digest any of my food. I suffered from a lot of bloating, and I mean, literally I couldn't eat eggs and it would make me bloat. And I went to every doctor, I tried so many different supplements, and it was just like this, it was so frustrating. I knew I was in a bad relationship, but I didn't put that together, that physical aspect with my emotional body. And so finally, after putting myself in traditional therapy, for a whole year, I sat in the therapy chair. And I connected some dots, like, oh, okay, now I understand why I'm in this relationship type of thing. But I was still experiencing the physical aspect of it. And finally, I was introduced to a mind-body practice called BEST. and that stands for Bioenergetic Synchronization Technique. Your audience can Google it and they will find so much information on that. It was founded by a doctor named Dr. Sue Morter, Morter, Morter. I always want to pronounce that motor, but it's Morter. Anyway, so I found this mind body technique, and I took a drive up to see the chiropractor. They call themselves chiropractors in Beverly Hills. And honestly, Gina, the first moment I met her name was Dr. Renata. I sat in her chair and she came in to talk to me. It was not like a regular doctor appointment. You know, she just came in, and just her presence made me feel comfortable. And she looked at me, and it was just as soon as she looked at me and I felt her energy, I immediately started to cry. She sat there and held space for me in silence and was staring at me with just these loving eyes, and I couldn't, it's like I couldn't handle her love. I was taken back by her energy and her just the feeling I got from this woman that I had never met. And she sat there and smiled at me and let me cry. And then she said to me these words. She held up her hand like a cup, and she said, "You know that you are a precious little diamond in my hand, and you deserve to be held like one." And I was just like, wow, I felt seen. I felt understood within 30 minutes, My point is that from that day forward, I have been religious about this work. And what this work does, in layman's terms, is it basically brings the body to present time. So you're not operating from the subconscious mind of, in my case, trauma at 5 years old. About a year doing this work, I had the courage to leave my dysfunctional relationship. And then about a year after that, so 2 years into doing the work, I left my career, which was in mortgage sales. Did very well financially, had a home at the beach at 30 years old, Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, personal trainer, Pilates, trips, designer clothes, right? But was I fulfilled? Sometimes I was, but not nearly as much as I knew at that point I could be. So fast forward, I'll get to the book. I take this leap of faith from a career that I had known since I was in my early 20s. And I basically started to find myself creatively. And there were so many things, Gina, that I did. I modeled a little bit as a teenager, so I went back and I did some modeling. I knew that wasn't it, but it was more, it was finding myself again. It was more getting to empower myself again. And I say more of my feminine side, because I was so masculine driven for so long. Anyway, so after a photo shoot one day, I went to like an after party, and I was actually on a raw food diet at the time. And I met these two people that owned a fitness magazine. And they were like, "Wow, how do you stay so lean? You look great." Blah. They were complimenting me. They said, "Oh, you must be doing high protein meat." And I was like, "Actually, no, I'm doing a raw food diet right now. I'm lifestyle, I guess I should say." And they were like, they were very intrigued because they were very into the muscle building and they were doing this magazine, Fitness X. And so they actually asked me to write an article for a year called Ask Jenna. And they wanted me to talk about holistic health and what I had learned through going back to school to get my holistic nutritionist license. And now I'm living this raw food lifestyle. And so I did this article for a year, Gina, and I knew at that point, I discovered basically my love for writing when I did the article. So I wrote the article for a year. I was like, wow, I like this. I can write, And So that kind of led me to then, I did other things, and then I actually created an organic skincare line called Beauty Mark Organics. Then I started writing a blog and newsletters and to my clients at the time that were purchasing the organic skincare. And at that point in my life, I had an assistant that would come over, and she was very artsy, and she liked to design, And so she told me one time, she said, Jenna, you need to stop giving this information out for free. You need to bundle up your message and all your writing, your blog and your fitness articles and all of your information, and bundle it up into something that you could promote or something that you could sell. And I was like, oh, well, what do you have in mind? And she said, I don't know. Let me think about it. So she leaves that day, and she comes back 2-3 weeks later. And basically she had bundled up all of my blog posts and what she had in her computer. And she made a tip book, a 31 tip book, health and beauty tips. And that was actually my first quote unquote book on Amazon. So from that book, Gina, on Amazon, I got an interview for Women's Radio up in Nevada. And I did this interview around the 31 tip book, and the interviewer wanted to know how I went from mortgage sales girl to author, writing this tip book. So I kind of went through my whole story a little bit like how I'm doing now. And after the interview, she tells me, Jenna, you need to write about your personal journey, including the tips, which are great, but you need to write about your personal journey. Hence, Love Your Body, Love Your Life, the book now today that's out. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it happened.
It's so amazing to take the time to see what your life has been and what you have done, mm-hmm. and the journey that you've taken. Mm-hmm. And it's cool that you took the time, that somebody crossed your path. Mm-hmm. And maybe my listeners can think of, has someone crossed your path and said, hey, there's this value in your life. There's this thing that you have to offer. Because you were talking about not really loving your life and finding the path to loving your life. And I think a lot of us as women, you're 47, I'm 53, we're in this transitional season of life. And we've lived so much life, right? We've done probably 100 different things. And it's so cool to see those dots connect when they don't, like you said, you went from mortgage banker girl to health and fitness organic girl. But isn't that the beauty of navigating our lives, is that we don't have to be stuck in the thing, whatever that thing is of who we are and what we've done, but that there's this creative journey that you chose to take. You had the courage to step outside. So I want to ask you about that. What motivated you to have courage and to make such a big shift? Was it just the dissatisfaction? Because now we're fast forwarding you to 47 years old and you're looking back on this. When you look back, what can you see in your journey that were markers of the changes? What motivated you to make those shifts, even though technically on a paper it didn't look like it made sense? It looked like a leap from one world to another. But what was it?
Honestly, I will go back to the two doctors that were there for me through Best Work, because Dr. Renata, which I just introduced you to in my story, but her husband actually worked with her as well, Dr. Ken. Even thinking about them makes me emotional because I'm filled with gratitude for them, Gina. They became kind of like my parents in a sense. I felt very supported. I felt very supported in that huge leap of faith. The relationship was one thing. To leave the dysfunctional relationship, I knew that had to happen. But then to leave the career, that was huge for me because that was my livelihood. And I wasn't jumping into another quote unquote job. I was jumping in to find myself in a different way. And so when you ask me if I went back and what helped me to take that leap of faith, I have to give a lot of credit to their support. because it's like I could call them, like anything could be happening in my life, that was a little bit scary, God, where's my financial piece going to come in, which by the way, didn't happen for a while. You get scared, you take that big of a jump and there's fear involved, and so I remember calling either one of them on several occasions and just saying like, you know what, I'm scared, or this happened today or whatever. They would always give me a different perspective on the situation that was happening. I think I need to elaborate on that a little bit is, talking spirituality, it's always the opposite. What we think is big to us down here is really small up there, right? It's always opposite. So what's small down here is really big up there. So I think what was happening is all these small shifts, it was almost like, I use God, but you can use the universe, whatever you believe in. God was saying like, she just needs to keep going. She needs to keep going, making these small shifts. And it wasn't really about the external world at all. It was about the internal world, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like I was learning all these things, and maybe or maybe not, I have to say they may or may have not have known this, Dr. Ken and Renata, but they knew how to talk to me where my whole nervous system would be like, oh, okay, I got this. I can keep going, until I find that next thing. And so I just felt really supported. And, I was already at that point when I left the industry that I was in, I was already dating my second husband. And, I would be lying if I didn't feel supported by that as well, because I knew that we were probably going to end up married. It was like that thing was there too. That foundation, I guess, quote unquote foundation was there as well for me. So it's like I had these three things that were going from these three people that to me, I knew like, okay, if I fall, they have my back kind of thing. And I think that's important for, if we're talking to women. I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship, a personal relationship. It can be somebody outside of your family. And honestly, I think I do believe that if you have one person, just one person that is in your corner 110%, and you feel open enough to share your deepest and darkest secrets with, and you know that you're not going to be judged on them, and you're just able to go wherever you want to go in the conversation and just share openly and vulnerably, and you know that one person is not going to judge you, they are only going to support you and bring different perspectives in your life, or give you ideas about different choices, and they believe in you. They do believe in you. I feel like it doesn't have to be a family member. It doesn't have to be a husband or a wife or even a child. It can be somebody outside of your circle. But if you have one person that can do that for you, I think it's huge. It's golden. Thank God I had that support at the time.
You talked about community essentially, and that's one of the pillars I think that's so necessary. And I think sometimes as we get to the middle of our life, we've done so much giving and so much serving and so much doing for other people that we think we have community, right? We think we're surrounded, but we are not always knowing how to ask for the support that we need from the community that we currently have. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I totally understand.
I think a lot of women pour out and they become empty. I know for me, that was more natural than knowing how to ask for help, ask for support. And so that's a really good point about loving yourself, loving your life, is understanding the difference between being the support for other people and then receiving it back in that sense where you have a safe place. I love how you said that Dr. Renata held a safe space for you. I think that is so important in your conversation, in your message, and you've said it more than once in different ways, is that you got to have just one. We don't need like that. You know, those people who have been friends with their girlfriend since high school and they still go have their wine trips or whatever. And I don't have that. But the people that come into my life might not have been there since high school, but they are here now and they're 100% present, and they check in on me and they say, how are you doing? I'm thinking of you. I'm praying for you. And when I am wise, I respond. So I hear you saying it's that reaching out. I think that's the practice that I hear you saying. You were struggling, but you made the choice to ask for help, to reach out and get that perspective, to get out of our own head, because that's the self-judgment. We're all making mistakes. You and I said this before we hit record. It's like life is not a one and done. It's a journey of shifts and changes and layers of growth. And so I love that you talked about getting perspective from your community, whether it's just one person. Never disregard that one person who will stick by you no matter what you go through. That's such a good point. So I really wanted to highlight what you were telling in your story, which is, ladies, we need to have support, and we need to allow the support in our lives. Acknowledge we need it and then allow it to happen, because I think in these many, many transitions that midlife brings, we have got to take care of ourselves. That's this conversation about being your best self. We can't be the Lone Ranger. We really do need the support to go through. So I really appreciate that you brought such a specific highlight to that key point. So we've talked about the community. Let's talk about the work you've done. I know you've done different layers of work, but today, if someone were sitting in front of you and you said, hey, I know that you've been through this, whatever this is, here's the work that I've done to get to the place where I can share my journey in a way that helps another person grow. It could be spiritual work, it could be physical work, it could be emotional work. Yeah. What kind of work have you done, not as a validation of your journey, but as a, look, I've done hard work and this is the journey you take? Because somebody may hear your journey and connect with something you use that can help them with their breakthrough.
Really quick, I just want to go back on what you were saying about how we as women can't do it as a Lone Ranger, and it's important to reach out and ask for what we need. I just want to touch on that because it's been a challenge for me as well to do that. I think it's more about being vulnerable is what I'm hearing to say, and I just need to speak into that, because I think that's a huge thing that we as women, we do want to put on the face, right? We do want to say, oh, I'm Wonder Woman. I got this. I have my family. I got my husband. I got my kids. I homeschool. I'm good. But it's hard to come to even if you have a friend that's been going to wine with you for years, to say, you know what, I have a body image thing that I just can't get over, or whatever it is, that's vulnerable. Or even asking for anything, just getting to the deeper layer of what it is you're challenged with. So I just wanted to speak into that because I think it is about being vulnerable, with somebody. Even if somebody knows you for a long time, it's still hard to get to those deeper conversations.
Even that is work, though, that you've done, is it not? That is part of the work, is to acknowledge that, as a matter of fact, I don't have all my stuff together. As a matter of fact, I might have ducks. They're nowhere near a row. They could be in somebody else's pond. I don't know what the heck is going on in my life. So I really do feel like you've actually answered both topics. That vulnerability is a tool. It is a step. And I always do a caveat when it comes to these types of things. Mm-hmm. You and I both know what it is to be in unhealthy relationships. We need to grow enough to understand who to be vulnerable with. And that's part of the journey, is we don't open ourselves up to people that are unsafe, people that will judge. And you said Dr. Ken and Dr. Renata did not judge you. That is a key element in finding support. It needs to be someone who loves you enough to speak the truth in love, but not from a place of judgment. And so that vulnerability is a precious gift that you give to another person. So, without being preachy, that's part of the work, is knowing who and when and what, right?
Yes.
Who we share with, when we should share, and what we should share, because not everyone should have the same level of access to us. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's about being discerning, with who you can open up to. And I think that the only way to have discernment is to work on yourself first, because, speaking again from personal experience, I made some really poor choices, I guess, on the bigger scheme of things, of course, it's never a poor choice, or, I don't want to use those words, but because I learned lessons from two big relationships. And now I'm really able to be open with other women about my situation and what my experience was. But I didn't have the level of intimacy, I suppose, with myself in order to see that my choice could have been a little bit slightly better, so the only way to have discernment with who you can trust is to trust yourself. And that's lifelong, Gina. I mean, I think that takes me back to something that I've done, which is I've worked on my inner child, because it does take you back to your childhood. And if you were in a solid foundational family with parents that were intimate with their own selves in order to see you, and that would give you a sense of trust within yourself. But I mean, I haven't met that woman yet. Have you? I don't know. So anyways, I think that's definitely, just to circle back around, inner child work. That was huge for me. That was really the pivotal point for me in my journey, is when my inner child was ready to be healed. That was pivotal for me. And so when I work with clients in my life, I life coach, I spend a lot of time with that, because it's really the memory of the childhood will keep coming up, and you'll keep doing the same pattern because of something that may be hidden and unconscious that you're not even aware of. For me, it was relationships with men. Something happened traumatically when I was 5 years old. I write about it in my book. So if you want to read more about that, you can read the book. But something traumatic happened to me when I was 5 years old. And that it made me believe, and I decided in that moment that I wasn't good enough. And my nervous system went into a fight or flight situation that I have had to work deeply on to balance out. And still to this day, even though I'm conscious of what happened, what I decided at 5, that my nervous system went into fight or flight, still to this day, like I shared with you when we first got on the call, situations will come up in my life that will take me back to 5 years old, and my nervous system is out of balance again. And I have to go to breath work and all my tools that I've learned to put myself back into balance. I actually talk to myself. I understand that it's my inner child that's having a tantrum, or that's scared in that moment. So then I use the tools to get myself back there. Yeah, for me, that was huge. And not only, we talk about trauma a lot, right? But not only did I, heal that trauma and understand where it came from, all my choices and decisions, but I also discovered a deeper part of myself. And for example, when I was going through my inner child healing, Gina, I would wake up at 3 a.m. for months on end, and poetry would just pour out of me. I had no recollection that I can write poetry. And I'm telling you, that will probably be my next book because I have that much content of poetry that was just, and I still write poetry today. And so I want to just say that out loud, because it's not only about healing the trauma, it's also about discovering more talents and gifts that might be in yourself, in there, that you haven't touched on.
You know, I'm listening to you, and I'm so understanding what you're going through. You and I, before we hit record, we have very similar stories. And so when we talk about the inner child, there's a familiar conversation for you and I. Mm-hmm. And so to put a little framework around that for the listeners, you know, when we are in our formative years, a little bit beyond 6, our prefrontal cortex is not formed. So we don't have a filter. We're not able to logic through anything. Somebody says something to us, it is what they say. So what they say is true. So if they say you're stupid, or you're ugly, or you can't do anything right, or you're just in a dysfunctional environment, it becomes something we make agreement with because we have no other neuro choice. Our brain cannot do it yet. So at 5 years old for you, and I was in the same years when my trauma happened, we, in our child mind, understand things from a very limited place, right? So when we talk about doing inner child work, it's not this woo-woo thing. I want people to understand that this is getting in connection with the things you hurt with now, the things that trigger you, the repetitive patterns in our lives that frustrate us. Like, why do I struggle with this thing? I can totally agree with you, Jenna. I've done this work myself as a coach. You go back and there's a distinct moment, most people can remember it, where something happened and that thread has just sewn through their life, that belief, that mindset, that thing, and it's literally tripped them up into their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. So it's how shall we put it? It's a beginning to understand how you came to be who you are. Mm-hmm. Almost like you're looking at yourself as a child and you're understanding what that child went through. You're seeing the connection because, see, we're mind, body, spirit. There's things that are happening. Our bodies store memories. It's not our brain. It's our bodies. You talked about your body's suffering. So when we talk about loving your body and loving your life, we tend to think of weight, physical health, and fitness and that sort of a thing. But the inside, you said this too, it's an internal game, right? What we're thinking is specifically and targeted in our cellular body. So if we have something that's tripping us up that we think we've dealt with, quote unquote, because, I'm fine, I let that go. But if you see patterns in your life, this inner child work that you are talking about, that's the key to unlock that trigger. Really going back and holding a space for that child and understanding that agreement that you made at 5, that agreement that I made at that age, we didn't know any better. And maybe the adults in our life didn't know any better. And we need to understand that so we can move forward. Would you agree with that explanation?
Totally agree. A couple things that I heard while you were saying that is, once somebody agrees to do some deep inner child work, you then can become the parent of your own inner child. So then you are able to say to your child, like, well, we can't play right now, but, we're going to play at the end of the week, or we got to go to bed early tonight, or we can't have that chocolate bar at 12 midnight or the ice cream, because we got hurt today. We want to eat all the ice cream. Can't have that right now, but we can have that on the weekend for, one ice cream cone. I'm just using maybe a little bit quote unquote surface examples, but you can become the parent of your own inner child. And that helps, to be able to give yourself some boundaries around whatever you want to change in your life or take a different direction. Also, what was huge, Gina, in what I've done as far as tools is forgiveness work. And, spinning off the inner child work, the forgiveness work is huge, because you can go back and forgive the adults, in your life, or the relationship, or the teacher, whoever hurt you, because I know that it's easier. We tend to be like, well, they hurt me. I'm mad, or I'm angry, or I'm sad. And why would I want to forgive? But it's not about the other person. It's about freeing yourself. So that was the other thing that I heard when you were speaking into that. Forgiveness work is huge.
And, back to that idea of our body, you talked about the digestive system. When we're caught up emotionally in something, our bodies do respond. And so when we don't forgive, we're the number one sufferer, the number one victim of that lack of forgiveness really is ourselves, our bodies, ourselves. We damage ourselves when we hang on to anger and resentment in unforgiveness. It is an act of self-care to release. I've had 2 podcasts on forgiveness, and they've been really good, because a lot of people think it's like, oh, I'm letting them off the hook. It may look that way, because we are still misunderstanding the truth of forgiveness. Forgiveness is really, on one level, I'm going to release this emotion, this bond, this hold over me, my body, my cells, my emotions, and I'm going to let God, however you see it, handle that business. And I'm going to get about the business of loving my life and serving the people in my life who deserve my energy, who deserve it. So it's not a bitterness place. It's really about a self-care. How much better can I show up in my life if I'm not hung up on someone who really probably doesn't care that they wounded us, right? Sometimes they could be dead, the person that you can't forgive. So this forgiveness work that you're talking about releases us from bondage.
Absolutely. It's so heavy to carry around. It's such a heaviness. I remember doing the work, and I still do it if I need to. But you do feel physically lighter in your body. I remember even losing weight within my forgiveness work. I wasn't doing anything different. It's just a shifting and a letting go of heaviness in the heart. It depends on where you carry your emotion and what emotion you are feeling. But for example, I know that anger is directly related to the liver. Resentment is directly related to the gallbladder. So it's like there's some definite correlations between the emotion and the physical body, for sure, no doubt. That's what this best work is all about, bioenergetic synchronization technique, which is the foundation of the life coaching work that I do. But that's what that's all about. It's really about getting into the body, out of the head, feeling where you feel everything in the physical body. A lot of my work too was around not doing everything quote unquote right. There's some times when I would wake up and I would, feel bad or whatever. And I would think to myself, I did everything right yesterday. I did everything right. I went to yoga. I ate healthy. I did this. I did that. I did everything right. Why am I feeling emotionally bad? Or why do I miss that bad relationship? I'm doing everything right. Or for example, I'm going to all of my therapy sessions. I'm doing everything I have to do. It's not about that. It's about getting into the body, feeling where you feel the emotion, feeling where you feel the conversation from the boss or the husband, and basically being with it, not running from it, being with it. I remember that was so difficult for me, Gina. Like, just being with my emotions, sitting with them. I remember, my mentor, telling me just be with it. And I'd be like, who wants to do that? Who wants to do that? I love her voice too. My mentor's voice is just so calming. Just be with it. Just love it. Just know it's there. Just know it's passing by. It's passing through. And it's so true. It's like we want to run from it. We want to run from our emotions. We want to run from whatever. We want to hide. Just like what you said in the very beginning of the podcast. We want to hide. We want to run. But if we are able to sit with whatever's going on, it passes sooner.
Right. The resistance is causing so much more suffering, isn't it?
Oh my God. Yeah. And the fighting against whatever's happening in your world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or knowing that you have to take the next step. You don't want to. The resistance. Exactly.
So when we think about the idea of becoming empowered and becoming our best self, I think you and I would agree that this kind of work, this kind of becoming self-aware, mm-hmm. and getting connected with, why do I do the things that I do? Not in a judgmental way, but in a curious way. And then allowing space for that journey, because it helps us, like you said earlier on, to know ourselves better. Mm-hmm. This journey of self-discovery is not some like existential thing. It's literally getting connected with something happens, you feel it, right? And have you ever had that experience where you're like, wow, I really overreacted to that. Like, what was that about? Like, have you ever looked at yourself and been like, dude, you got out of control and it didn't make sense to you in the moment? I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully somebody gets it, right? But there's something to that. I think that's an example of, okay, you get in a situation, maybe the situation keeps coming back. What do they say? The teacher returns until you learn the lesson.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
Right? And so those are the things you're talking about, that self-awareness to, okay, I totally overreacted in that situation. What causes me to flip like that? That's a starting point to becoming your best self, is to really identify, not judge, identify those situations and find the common thread and get the support you need to do the work. You can do some on your own, but it really is helpful to have an outside perspective, because that saying, you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's really a community game.
For sure. And especially as women, we like to talk. We like to, express ourselves. That was a huge thing for me too. I've found my voice through this journey. I was very quiet for a long time. I didn't express myself. I was shy. I didn't want people to see or hear me. I'm definitely an introvert. So I took it all in. So, and for those that are listening that are shy and they're uncomfortable with themselves, they haven't found their voice yet. They have other deeper issues. That's super important, to find somebody that is non-judgmental, that you feel comfortable with. And it can change, you don't have to stay with the same person, but, talk out loud to somebody.
Yeah. Yes. Journaling is a great tool too. Like you do it through poetry and music, but for some people it can just literally be getting it out of your head, because the stuff that gets stuck in our head can keep us stuck just because it's bouncing around in there, making no sense and confusing us, right? And so becoming our best self, dump it out, get it out.
I talk about that all the time on my podcast, Gina, to journal. I'm a huge journaler. I mean, 3 pages in the morning and I'm good. Morning pages. Yeah, so 3 pages in the morning, I'm good. And by the 3rd page, I'm a little clearer. And
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. It's a physical thing too, right? Because it's just like, yeah. And you feel just, okay, got it out.
Isn't it amazing? I just how we were created, how we process emotion, how we store it, how we process it. I talked about specifically originally when I started working on the things that I knew needed to be handled in order for me to have the life I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I realized I had to do some changing. And so I'm a driven person. So I was like, I'm going to do this thing and check it off and I'll be done. And you and I both agreed that it's more of a journey. You have to really embrace the process. And I used to resist that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I leaned into the reality that there's layers like an onion, right? We do have levels of growth and we do break through. But a lot of the times there's something else or another layer to that thing, something else triggers us. There's maintenance that has to be done, like you were saying, right? Sometimes you have to go back and do the breath work. Oh my gosh, breath work. Let's talk about that tool and in really loving yourself and becoming empowered. Talk a little bit about that, because I know for me, breathing is like legit one of the most powerful tools to calm my nervous system, get my brain to quit spinning. So talk about that from your perspective.
Yeah. Can I share one exercise? And now this is not created by me. This was actually created by the Mortar Institute, which the best work I've been talking about the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called central channel breathing. And this particular breath will calm the nervous system down instantly. And what somebody does, Gina, is they actually squeeze Mulabunda. So like the Kegel exercise.
Yes.
Okay, so they squeeze, it's called Mulabunda. So you squeeze Mulabunda and you actually take a breath from 6 feet above your head, which is, it's God essence above your head, right? So they take a breath from 6 feet above their head while squeezing Mulabunda, breathing the breath 6 feet above their head through the midpoint of the eye, your third eye, down into the throat chakra, down to the heart chakra, the solar plexus, the root chakra, grounding themselves, breathing out through the bottom of their feet, 6 feet, out the bottom of their feet, and then back through the bottom of their feet, bringing in the energy from the earth in through their body, same chakra system, squeezing the Mulabanda the whole time. So that breath, I know there's a little bit of, it sounds more difficult than it is, and it may take a little bit of time to get the hang of it, but that breath is something that I live by every day. Right before I get out of bed, I do that breath. At night, I breathe right before I fall to sleep, or even in between in my day. I squeeze Mulabanda and I'm doing this breathing, and it's actually realigning the nervous system and calming the nervous system down. So if you're in like a situation where you're going in for an interview, or you're going to have a tough conversation with your husband, or whatever, whatever the case may be, you can actually squeeze Mulabanda and do this breathing, and your internal body, it signals the internal body to calm down. So that's something that I wanted to share when you said breath work.
Yeah. If people don't necessarily understand, you visualize the breath coming through that center and out. It's not just breathing, it's connecting to what you want the breath to do. And so that passage is a very mindful kind of present breathing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So if nobody's done that before, they might be thinking, well, how do I get my breath to go through there? It's really you're seeing this happen. Mm-hmm. You're watching it move through, and you're listening to your breath while you're doing it. I know for me, a box breath where you inhale for 4, hold for 4, mm-hmm. exhale for 6. You can hold for 4 at the bottom. You can do a 4-4-4 or mm-hmm. 4-4-6, and then just inhale again. That really calms my nervous system as well. I use that at night to go to sleep, or if I'm feeling stressed about something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love the close one nostril, breathe in, close the other one, breathe out. You can do that while you're driving,
So if you're thinking of breathing, if I could paint a picture with words, you would hold your right nostril, Inhale through your left nostril, hold your breath, close your left nostril, and then breathe out through the right nostril, then in through the right, hold your breath, switch nostrils, out by the left. So it's kind of like up and over and down, and then back up the same side over and down, if I could draw a picture. I forget the name of that breath. I used to actually know what it was called.
Nostril breathing, I think. Nostril breathing.
It has a yogic name, but it's really a good thing because most of us are not breathing well because of the stress that we're going through. Mm-hmm. So we have literally covered so much ground in the last 55 minutes that it is time for you to give 3 gifts to my tribe. If we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of ideas. So what 3 strategies or gifts can you give to my tribe as they're thinking about really loving their body, not just their physical body, how they look on the outside, but we're really talking about that internal game.
Yes.
What would those 3 gifts be?
Number 1, I know that I feel like I need to say, just follow your heart. Whatever the little voice inside of you is saying, just follow your heart. I believe that your heart never steers you wrong. I did share in our conversation that, I was into not so good relationships. I followed my heart, and I believe wholeheartedly that there was gifts along the way that got me to where I am now. So follow your heart, even if it sounds crazy, even though it doesn't make quote unquote sense. Your heart will never steer you wrong. So that's something that I want to give as a gift. Number 2 would be just to reiterate to definitely find somebody that you can trust, that you can talk to, that you can open up to, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can ask for support. I feel we need that. I feel as women we do need support. And number 3 would be, there's so much, but number 3 would be find something that you love to do other than your job. Find something creative that you love to do, because I feel like once you dive into something creative as a woman, it opens up all kinds of other ideas, and juices will flow, and it may just lead you on to something else that you'll find a whole other world in. So definitely find something that you love to do creatively. And that's all on your own. Like, that's all yours. It's not your kids. It's not your husband. It's not your friends. It's all you. Something that you love.
That's beautiful.
Something that maybe your inner child loved to do. Or that
that's actually true.
Your child loved to do. That may lead you to like a pot of gold right there. What did you love to do as a kid that you stopped doing as an adult?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's so true. We're reconnecting with those parts of ourselves. I just went to an event, and one of the phrases that they used was, stop orphaning off parts of yourself. And I think we've done that all along the way. So this is really a journey of bringing those pieces back to wholeness. Yeah.
For sure.
Jenna, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I honor your journey. I honor you sharing your story with courage and with such vulnerability. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Gina. It was so much fun.
Awesome. Today I've been speaking with Jenna-Lisa-Lobos. She's an author and a podcaster of Love Your Body, Love Your Life. And if you head over to the show notes at www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 147, I will have links for you to connect with Jenna, with her book, with her practice. And that way, if you're driving, don't worry. I've got it all written down for you. You don't have to remember. You can just use that link. While you're there, please leave your name and email address and join my tribe. And remember, my friends, this is a community of women where it's safe. This is a place where you can be seen and heard and matter. So please plug into the Feminine Roadmap community. Please plug into what Jenna is doing. Find those women who are going through the journey in a way that you are so that you can become your best self. And when we talk about loving your body, remember that this is an inside game. Do not be afraid to do the work, my friend. Connect with the things you used to love to do. Find a way to incorporate them in your life and honor the journey, the beautiful, messy journey that we call life, so that you can become the best version of yourself with joy and with freedom. Thank you so much for joining us today, my friends. I look forward to sharing more powerful conversations with you next week. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.